Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Bangladesh Youth Corp podcast. As you already know, we have already aired 2 episodes and with amazing personalities on climate change, policy and whatnot. But today's podcast is really special because we have 2 special people on our set today. So without any further ado, let's get introduced with them. First, we have Harjeet Singh, Global Engagement Officer, Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, and we have Shibayan Raha, Asia Coordinator, Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. Welcome to Bangladesh and thank you for taking out to be with us today. And it's really an honor to have you with us today. And we have our favorite Nazmul Hassan Miraj Bhai, lead Young People and Just Society ActionAid Bangladesh, who is very kind to host all of us today in this podcast. So, as you already know, in Bangladesh Youth Corp podcast, we try to debunk and converse with the complex topics which is a little bit critical and complex to the young people. So following the trend, today we will be talking about just transition, global energy trend and how young people can be engaged on this conversation on national and global level. So as I have really amazing guests today on this podcast, I am really excited that we will have a really nice conversation today on just transition, which is at the center of conversation regarding climate change, Conference of the Parties and UNFCCC at this time. So my first question to all of you, as we are talking about global energy trend and the global, politics and climate change, just transition is just, irreparable to all of these things. So firstly, as most of our audience, they are young people and young people from local areas, young people from, Dhaka or urban areas, from rural areas, let's first debunk the concept of just transition. So what is just transition to you? Whom should I go first?
Okay, so let me first of all say thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to join this conversation, especially which is oriented towards youth who are facing a world which is full of disasters with no cause of theirs, and we are not leaving the world behind which is safer for them. So they have a lot at stake, and it's our responsibility to work with them to also help them understand some of these complex topics. Now, when we talk about just transition, we're basically saying a transition that is already happening from fossil fuel dependent economy towards renewable energy. But the question is whether that transition is going to be just, which means are we going to be able to see justice happening when we make that transition? Because it's not going to be an easy one. We are talking about a very complex economic system which has been built on fossil fuel based industrialization. So you have workers who are part of the fossil fuel industry, you have consumers who depend on it, and everybody in between who are part of this economy and serving various strata of the society. So to make that transition, we will have to make sure that nobody is left behind and we deliver justice, which means people who are part of that economy, they are getting alternatives to move away from it, which means they have access to technology, they have access to new skills, they have access to financial resources, and that will not be possible unless we understand the meaning of justice in this transition. And it requires an all hands on deck approach from communities to subnational governments to national governments to the international community. So let me start with that, and I'm sure other guests are going to add.
I'm sure Dr. Bhai and Shibayan also has a lot to add. Nazmul Bhai.
To me, actually, I'd focus to make it linked with the realizing human rights.
Wow.
So when you're in the process of transition, so how we are also realizing the rights of the most marginal community. This is important to me. At the same time, I would say whether those who are the part of the transition, so whether they have the voice in making the transition, and they are taking part in the decision-making process, or it is imposed. So to me, it is not imposed. To me, it is the part of the whole transition process, and also realizing the rights is also issues of empowerment and the capacity of the community. So how the community is prepared also to take the leadership for making the transition happen, rather than somebody else who is actually doing the transition on behalf of them. No. So to me, it's the part of the whole gamut of rights, and it's the whole gamut of empowerment process.
Thank you. Shibanda.
Yeah, for me, when I look at the just transition process, it has to be community owned, community led. Like what Nazmul Bhai said, is that are they being consulted? So one trend that we keep seeing is that there's this mega RE projects that's coming, mega solar parks, mega this, mega that. It's at least in some parts of the world, like they're actually uprooting traditional communities, indigenous communities. And we are saying that just transition is for the people. So how is it for the people when people are still getting uprooted? Because that's what the fossil fuel infrastructure companies did. So we are actually following the same trend. If you're following the same trend, I don't think we are actually fulfilling any of the just transition principles. So for me, it has to be fair, equitable, and just. So, and that can only happen when communities are actually consulted, they own it, and they lead it. And then the question comes, but can those projects fulfill everything? Probably not. But then if it's a bigger project, it still has to be community consulted. Without their consultation, no projects could be called just.
Thank you. So I see the youth perspective is missing here, so I'd like to jump in for a little bit. For me, just transition is all about the inclusion, because who are we transiting for? For the future generation, also for the present generation, but the benefit will be going mostly to the future generation. And the future generation is all about the children and the youth who are, facing the problem right now. So for me, it is about the inclusion of these children, these young people, those marginalized people, those women who are being suffered, those indigenous communities. And as Shibanda just said, they should be at the center of decision making. They should be at the center of the planning. So thank you. That was really a nice debunking of just transition. Now I would like to go to Shibanda again. You have been working in Asia mostly regarding this just transition thing for a long period of time. So how do you see the scenario of just transition in South Asia and the global South? What is your experience regarding working on this?
Global South is really huge, and I haven't traveled half of that, right? So I'm going to focus mostly on South Asia and Asia a little bit. When I was in 350.org, we did a campaign called Looking at the Just Transition Scenario in South Asia. We looked at, and it's a huge subject, each country is so big, right? So, but we looked at the scoping of what they are, like India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal. And we looked at, are they doing any just transition? Are they doing any RE projects? Or are they, what's the scope? And where we see some of the things that we've seen, and which is the interesting thing, is that Pakistan has already endorsed the Fossil Fuel Treaty, but they have a huge transition process to do, which they're also doing. So that's one, right? But again, at the same time, we have to face it that most of South Asia and Asia, we have a legacy of we are under colonization for so long. They looted our complete resources, and we have really been independent how much, 60, 70, 80 years or so on. So we're still struggling to go to that stage where the people, our colonizers who looted us, they're actually sitting on the developed spectrum. So if you look at the South, at the just transition scenario, we are still at a very nascent stage. But the good news is that for, say, countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, even say Maldives, like the transition can be very fast and quick because their fossil fuel infrastructure is completely nil, right? Sri Lanka has one coal plant, Maldives doesn't have any, Nepal doesn't have any. Nepal's whole electricity comes from hydro, right? Bangladesh, in the last 16 years, they went opposite side and started building coal plants. So now it's like, oops, we have so much of fossil fuel workforce. But still, Bangladesh can transition really fast, right? It's still and Bhutan is, of course, it's a carbon neutral country, so there's no question. When they can transition, they have transitioned, they just have to endorse the treaty. For India, it's a different story because let's face it, but that we have a huge fossil fuel workforce in the coal sector, right? So that transition will take time, but that transition in terms of our RE under Prime Minister Modi has already started and they're showing good results. So if you look at that, the transition process, at least in South Asia, is already happening, right? And it looks at a really good angle. One of the places I want to also talk about, because it just came from there, is Cambodia. I will say Cambodia is like a sleeping giant. In the sense is that in terms of transition, their potential is huge, and they are actually doing a lot of good work in that process. As an example, I will say that a lot of other Southeast Asian countries can actually transition faster, but they are also going against the trend is because of Japan. Right, Japan is investing a lot on LNG, and literally they're derailing the entire just transition process. So there's like 2-3 different, and of course Bangladesh is where Japan is doing the same. Now they're doing the ammonia co-firing. I think, the scenario looks bright, but it's also not really bright because there are other players, foreign players, coming into the picture and saying, we know best. We know our LNG can help you. We know these solutions can help you. What they're not saying is that these are not tested solutions. They don't do any good, like ammonia co-firing.
Thank you. So, still, population is also another problem. Yeah. Education, capacity, resource, that is also another problem. But
can I add one thing? Is that one thing we have to look at when we say that just transition, it has to be phased. Mm-hmm. It cannot happen today. It is like, and but you're looking at the treaty, or even if you look at the just transition advocates, you're not saying it has to happen now. Come on, we have a huge generation, again, young people, youth, who needs to study, who needs to get into the workforce. And that transition, we are looking at a time frame, 10 to 20 years, 25 years, and more, depending on where your economy is at. So when the fossil fuel company says, no, you can't transition now, you have to go to coal to fossil gas and then RE, we are saying we know that. We are not saying you have to go now. What we are saying is that we look at a time frame, and instead of all solutions like fossil gas, we can do that from coal to RE in that 20-25 year period.
I think this is where people, companies, and the businessmen, they get messed up. Yeah. And they also try to confuse people with this. That, okay, these companies, they are saying that you have to do it right now, but which is not really our message. Yeah. Thank you for debunking this. So you were saying about treaty, so I will straight go to Harjeet now, as you were one of the founding members when the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty initiated. So tell us about it. What is it? Why it happened? And how is it going now? And what is the end goal of this treaty?
Sure. So yes, I have been engaged with the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty right from the beginning, but our founder chair is Sapora Berman, and the initiative comes from the Pacific, and that's an important part because it's those vulnerable nations who recognize the need for a fossil fuel treaty in 2016, especially when Paris Agreement did not even mention coal, oil or gas or fossil fuel. And that was also true with the convention way back in 1992. And when we know that fossil fuels are the root cause of the climate crisis, that means coal, oil and gas, we cannot deal with the climate crisis without looking at the cause and what we say in technical terms, the supply side problem. So on demand side, we can say, yes, we can reduce our consumption of energy. We can be more efficient in using energy. But unless and until we move away from fossil fuels, because burning of those fossil fuels have caused the crisis. So even the renewable energy that is growing, if it does not displace fossil fuels, we will not deal with the problem. So the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative is a bold call to have a new global framework that is going to look at this issue in a very systematic and comprehensive manner. So the Paris Agreement has barely mentioned these words starting at COP26 in 2021, and then in 2023 we finally got a language which says transitioning away from fossil fuels. We got that in Dubai. But almost 2 years have passed and we have not seen any progress. Rather, we have seen regime change in the US, and which is now pushing more fossil fuels into the system, which is going to delay the transition. So what you need is a global framework that can hold those countries to account so that we have a plan to make a just and orderly transition. As Shibayan said, developing countries cannot turn off the tap right now. We are dependent. Our economies have been built around fossil fuels. We need a plan. And we need a plan which is phased, which is supported through finance and technology. And there are various aspects. We see people and communities dependent on fossil fuels, either for jobs or for energy. Right. We also see economies dependent on it. They get revenues from it. And there are so many employment options that get generated from extraction to supply to energy consumption. So you need to think about all those aspects, and somehow Paris Agreement and these COPs do not provide that space. So we do have a negotiating track called Just Transition Work Program. Trust me, it's not really providing us enough space for that kind of conversation, and we need to get into a mode where we start working with countries to develop a plan. Now, Bangladesh plan is going to look very different from Cambodia or from India or from Malawi or from Indonesia. So each country is going to develop that plan to move away from fossil fuels in a phased, just and orderly manner. And that's why the concept of justice and equity and community engagement are actually at the core of Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative. So at this moment, we have 17 countries who are calling for this treaty. And but it is supported by a mass movement from 4,000 civil society organizations to 101 Nobel laureates to 120 cities to 600 plus faith institutions to 1 million people, and hundreds of thousands of young people, 25 banks, and the list goes on. Right. So we have this mass movement, we have governments who have come forward, and we need more and more countries so that we have a framework which is complementary to Paris Agreement. It doesn't replace or displace Paris Agreement. You need Paris Agreement. It has some very good elements. But then on fossil fuels, you need something else, which is a new global framework.
Thank you. That's huge. And would you like to add who will be the stakeholders of this thing? You already mentioned some of those. So regarding promoting the treaty, who do you see as the brightest stakeholder?
Well, we need all hands on deck approach. We need people from different walks of life, and that's why we have the faith community and health community, human rights community. We also have labor unions who are part of it, because everybody gets affected with it. But ultimately, governments have to drive. And that's why we now have 17 nations. We need many more. So unless they are on board, we will not be able to move forward.
Thank you. I just wanted to hear this because I will go to Nazmul Bhai regarding this. So Nazmul Bhai, Harjeet Singh just mentioned that when we want to make this type of huge things to transit, to change, we need a really, combined approach. So to make anything pushed, to make anything successful, I think the biggest ray of hope is youth.
Okay.
So we have already discussed about how the just transition is looking in South Asia and how the treaty is going on. So now I would like to hear from you. What do you see? Where is the role of youth here, and how the young people can really make a difference regarding through all of this process?
Thank you again. Sometimes we are trapped in the words. Let's say, as last COP, that there is a decision of transitioning away, no? So who will make the transition? This is the big question right now. And Harjeet Singh ji talked about the treaty, Fossil Fuel Treaty, banning treaty. In fact, so these are our expectation. These are our goals that we want to make for the transition, no?
Yeah.
And as I'm saying, we are sometimes trapped in the these vocabularies or terminologies. So demystifying these terminologies, making a social contract and agreement in the society, and then making the connection in between the society and the state and government, I think is very much important role to take place. And as you said, the role of the young people. I believe that the transition is actually says about a period of time to take initiatives, to take action. No, so and who will take the action? So we see the young people here, I think, placed in a very good with the knowledge, enthusiasm, and also some tools and techniques. Tools and techniques, in a sense, let's say they can really play a big role in terms of making the social agreement, social contract. Yes, transition is needed. So this is one thing is actually they can do right now. And the future transition, the future pathways. What is the future pathway? I think the future pathways are to make that plan actually. What are the other things? What are the alternatives? What are the innovations? What are the governance style we want to see? What are the what are the government mechanism to realize the rights of the people, and what are the service providing delivery mechanism are in place. So these planners should be in place. So young people they themselves should be aware on that. They can be aware on that, and they can be take a leadership position to develop those plans in collaborating with the various stakeholders, with the government and the other policymakers at national and global level. So I would say, since we are talking about 20-25 years, or as we are talking about by 2050 we will be having net zero situation. So but we now make it, we can tell it, let's say by 2050 we will have a transition which is just, and which is also accountable. So we can put it in that way rather than it net zero situation. So I think this period, young people really they can take the leadership in terms of making that consensus, social agreement, contract, and pushing the government with the plan, with the evidence, and bringing some kind of solutions with the innovation as well. So technology. So these are they are a huge role, I would say. Young people like this, they are the people who can make the transition happen with beyond that trapped in the terminologies.
Thank you. And as a young people, I would like also to hop in because, as we see it, whenever government is doing something wrong or they are not doing something legal or not transparent, you see the young people is on the street. The young people is, protesting.
The accountability is a big mechanism. Yes. Even today we discussed in terms of the accountability. Yeah. So every system should have an accountability mechanism everywhere. So the mechanism probably will not be unique everywhere, but it's different in terms of system and process. But young people, I think, should develop that accountability mechanism in terms of building the relationship with the government and policymakers. So it is not like that whatever the policymaker is saying all the time, and we are believing that the young people are believing that. Yes, you have said right. So that mechanism should be there. Always questioning the authority, powerful, and the try to identify the cause, reason behind the narrative that this government and powerful companies are always trying to spread through various mechanisms. So why they are talking about that? So, and that is very much important. Identifying the cause behind the cause.
And also I'd like to add that young people is also crucial in working in two ways. Number one is pushing the just transition enhancement with the government, with all the stakeholders. I mean, they can be the innovators, they can be a really good stakeholder in the implementation, and they can also be the advocates. But at the same time, when this whole system is not going right, or this whole system lacks a little bit of transparency or accountability, they can also work in the second stream, and they can question this whole system so that the system is intact and the accountability is intact. So this is really interesting.
Comes up with the leadership practices, So the idea is we are talking about the young people are leading the transition. It's not that they are only working as a activist. They are working as from the outside of the relationship. So this is all about they are taking the leadership. They are taking the leadership for the transition. So this is from the government. We are expecting young brokers are taking the lead. We are expecting young policymakers. They're coming away with the ideas of just transition. We are expecting the young activists. So they're also putting some kind of activity mechanism, which is also just in, let's say, transparent. No? So these kind of things actually should in place. Giving the young people the space, the enabling environment, and with the people like her, that giving the knowledge, information, and also networking opportunities across. So this is also very much important in that case.
Thank you, Nazmul Bhai. Shibayan, I have a really difficult question for you, as we were having a really tough conversation regarding the accountability, transparency of a government. So you have been working with all the policymakers and governments regarding this treaty initiative, and also regarding just transition. What is your experience with them? Are they really, willing to do it, or they are also in some kind of gray situation that, okay, we will do it, but we don't know when? So what is your experience working with these policymakers and governments regarding just transition?
So I think not only on just transition, but carrying from what Harjeet said, Nazmul Bhai said, is that and what we understand is that accountability mechanism with policymakers, with everyone actually, but also with governments and policymakers, that's important. Another is that I come from a background, and some of you know, Harjeet also knows this, whereas I don't need to talk to governments, I don't want to talk to them, they're the problems. And when I realized, and I was very young, when you're young, you're protest, block. And then I realized you don't talk to them, things don't change, because they ultimately are the ones who will change. And how do they change? When you build that movement, when they build that mobilization. But once you mobilize, build, the next stage you have to talk, you have to negotiate. And that's what I think working the treaty makes me, and working with our great political team led by Jillian and others, is that I understand that really it's not an easy linear process. Everybody is different, every policymaker is different, but you have to keep engaging with them. And I realize even with some of the tough ones, or the ones that won't move, you keep engaging. At certain time they'll be like, you know what, let's talk. Let's have a conversation. We might not agree, we might disagree, but let's keep talking. And in some of the global political context, if you see that the conversations is one of the most difficult, but conversations are happening to change things. So that conversation, that dialogue is important. And I'll say that in my, not only just, I'll talk about just transition, but in my work with policymakers, I've seen, as an example, Dhulikhel, I keep giving. The mayor of Dhulikhel, Mr. Banjo, is the mayor. He's an amazing guy. Literally, he didn't only just endorse the treaty as the mayor of Dhulikhel. He's making those changes possible in terms of in city. And Dhulikhel has been declared as the WHO's second healthiest city in Asia. And they have been doing, if you go to Dhulikhel, you can feel the change. I'm very asthmatic. So when I go to it, so of course it's a much mountainous place. Dhulikhel is next to Kathmandu. It's kind of the sub-city. But you look at it, you can see the change, and you can see how excitedly he talks. And not only he's talking, he's also making those changes possible. That's one case. Another is that what we don't know is that a lot of the other mayors in Asia is doing major changes, right? In Bangkok, what a lot of don't know, the governor of Bangkok, they don't have mayor, they have the governor system. He's actually implementing a lot of solar rooftop systems, looking at how to generate more power, because Bangkok is very energy consumption wise. If you've gone there, you'll see that everything is moving so fast. There are sky trains, there are metros, there are electric, everything. There's big shopping malls, but he's doing that. Look at Jakarta. The governor of Jakarta is again electrifying the bus fleet. He's making some real changes. So here again comes another thing, is power mapping. Looking at who are in that spectrum, and if you look at just transition, who is the one who is actually going to be very easy to talk, or who is already making changes. So you start talking to them. Then you pick up the difficult ones. Then you pick up the ones who is not ready to talk. You still talk to them. You still start engaging with them. And as an example, I will very quickly say, when I started off very young, I started with the Tibetan freedom movement in India, and there used to be one guy who's quite elderly. His job because he's elderly, he's retired, he will post materials on Tibet to everyone. And one day he said, I'm sending this to this guy who only talks about why he's very anti-Tibet. And I said, why you are sending it to him? What will happen? He said, nothing. My job is to keep engaging with him, hoping that he'll also start engaging, but I shouldn't stop that engagement. So that was like, oh, actually we should keep engaging. So policymakers are good. It's just that we have to figure who are the ones we should start talking. Even the ones we don't want to talk, we should still talk, right?
Thank you. That is a perk of working with good people. I learned a good strategy here and I will apply that later. So, Harjeet, I would like to focus on something. When Shibayan Raha was talking, a lot of city names came, but Dhaka and Bangladesh did not come because Bangladesh is still not, as a state, Bangladesh has not endorsed the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty initiative yet. So, what is the situation? And I know you are working with all the governments regarding this endorsement. What is the situation in Bangladesh? And do you have high hopes that, yes, we will also be endorsed by this? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so Bangladesh has engaged with the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative. They were as part of our one of the ministerials in Baku at COP29 as one of the observers, and they are at a stage where they are trying to understand what the treaty initiative is and how they can engage and contribute. We would like to have Bangladesh as one of the key nations, and there are very important reasons why Bangladesh needs to engage. Bangladesh has been a climate leader globally for a very long time, talking about the vulnerability that comes with the climate crisis. And if you look at the work on adaptation or addressing loss and damage, Bangladesh has been such a champion and everybody acknowledges their role. But what we do not hear from them is about the energy transition, right? And it's time that Bangladesh talks about it as part of its international leadership. And why it's important, you mentioned Dhaka, and I come from Delhi, and we know how all these cities are so polluted, and fossil fuels are the main cause of this pollution. So if we move away from fossil fuels, of course in a just and orderly manner, countries like Bangladesh are going to be able to provide a clean and healthy environment to its citizens. So it's very much connected with the current challenges and where we need to be moving forward, and that's what we call just transition. And by joining 17 nations and calling for a treaty, Bangladesh will also be start perceiving as a leader in the just transition area, which means that it has an opportunity to attract more investments in the field of renewable energy, because then you are making your intention very clear that that is the direction you want to take. And that's why. And of course, the current dependence on fossil fuels means what? You are losing your foreign reserves. You have a very high import bill. You are actually dependent on the outside sources. You are not energy secure. Your energy sovereignty is at risk. So, which means that by going for renewable energy, and Bangladesh has a huge potential for renewable energy. So there are several reasons why Bangladesh needs to engage. And people would acknowledge and appreciate Bangladesh leadership in this space as well.
Thank you. And as you just said, that Bangladesh has a huge potential in terms of renewable energy. Nazmul bhai, you work with a lot of young people. How do you see young people's role in this? Because if we want to establish this or make Bangladesh a part of this initiative, obviously government has to sign the treaty, but also civil society, young people, we have a really big role to play. So how do you see this role?
This is very simple. That is to negotiate with the government.
Okay.
Negotiate with the, as also Shibayan ji also mentioned, in terms of at least the local level administration, local government. So, and negotiate with the government so that, we are talking about the renewable energy transition in terms of from the fossil fuel to the renewables. So, and this is the demand of the time, and this is the demand of the economy. Harjeet ji already mentioned our energy sovereignty and dependency on the importing of the fossil fuel. So I think this is a very good opportunity. We are sitting in a very good time, a moment of the time to take this decision, and young people should have understand their benefit as well in terms of their future growth and future economy. They will be leader of the future economy, if not now. So in that case, I would say this is very good time and last time to engage with the government, local government, to develop that narrative, to develop that argument as well, and pushing for the change. And from the last year 2024, we are saying we are also in a transition in a political system. So why not right now, young people and all of us engage with the government and making this voice loud? Yes, this is the time to take the decision, and if we take the decision, then I think we can make the real plan to make it happen. No, so taking the decision is a bold step we all expect to take by the government side, and young people to push on that, like you and other people. If all are in a platform and make it a bigger voice, so I think it's feasible, and the government, since it is a transition moment, so why not? This is the best moment to push forward by the young people. We have changed the last status quo that we came through. Yeah. That was youth led. Mm-hmm. So in terms of energy transition, why not? This is the leading by the young people. It's the issue of sovereignty. It's the issue of economy. It's the issue of independence. Gaining the independence. So I think we are very much in a good position at this moment. The young people are very much in a good position to negotiate with all these issues.
Thank you. Okay, so I think our conversation was really intense and it was really getting good, but time is limited and we have to go with that. So lastly, I'd like to go to all of you regarding one thing that we know this year, all of the countries, they are to submit their NDC 3.0, and Paris Agreement is also going to be, at the end. So this is really crucial moment to talk about just transition in this year's COP in Belém. So in your opinion, how the negotiation discourse will be at this COP in Belém? So, Harjeet, yeah.
Let's acknowledge that we are living in an increasingly complex world. We have wars going on. We have more money going to the military industrial complex. We also see that United States that has abandoned the Paris Agreement once again and pushing for more fossil fuel extraction, to the extent that they are pushing for American oil and gas now, which is cheaper and which is going to be very tempting for countries like Bangladesh, and they are pushing India to buy American oil and gas and to everybody else, so that we remain dependent on the fossil-based economy and making the transition much harder. And with the wars going on, even the European countries have deprioritized climate. They have pulled back on climate finance and aid, and also they are delaying their climate targets. So it's not a good situation that we are living in. At the same time, because we are talking about young people, how can we not mention about the International Court of Justice advisory opinion, which is a huge victory because of young people. So on one hand, you see that doom and gloom. On the other hand, what inspires us is what young people have achieved. And the reason I'm mentioning, because that has happened before we go to Belém. Now, we were going to Belém with that complexity and with governments backtracking, but now we have this inspirational outcome from the International Court of Justice to actually tell the world that states have a responsibility to act as part of our human right, as Nazmul Bhai mentioned, to provide us clean air, safe and healthy environment, and to deal with this existential crisis of climate change. So, and states also have a responsibility to regulate the private sector. So, it's a bit of mixed picture, but if you ask me, I am going to be going there with a lot of power and trust to push for a decision, so that we not only advance the just transition conversation, although as I said, it's very challenging to do as part of Paris Agreement, but as treaty, we will also be holding various consultations and getting more and more countries and constituencies engaged. So that's our target. But overall, we would like to see BELIM now delivering on climate justice, not only on just transition, but also on climate finance and other aspects on adaptation and dealing with loss and damage. So that's the kind of positivity we have to take despite all the complexities and challenges.
Thank you. Nazmul bhai?
Actually, we have to be hopeful in terms of NDC. We cannot be at that kind of luxury to be failed here in terms of NDC and the whole process. What I wanted to say, we have to put some kind of accountability mechanism in the NDC, because we see NDC is being developed and it is not being monitored. So this is the how can all the countries, whether it is global north and global south, this is irrespective of the countries, how whatever the plan they are being developed, or how they are being also implementing the whole plan. Without implementing the plan, making NDC actually sometimes make no sense. No? So in that case, I am hopeful, but I am also expecting that this year actually there will be some meaningful discussion in terms of implementation of NDCs and how a accountability mechanism is also inbuilt in the whole NDC process. We know the stock take is a process, but however, we see sometimes if it's not being implemented, there is nothing to say by anyone. So so that is not actually good sign for the whole target that to be achieved as they said by the Paris Agreement. So I really hope that the accountability process is there.
Thank you. That's a new take. Shivanda.
So, as someone who has never been to COP, so this is coming from a very outsider view. But as Nazmul Bhai said, we have to be hopeful. We don't have a choice, right? And in terms of the discourse of negotiations, we have to negotiate. There is also no choice, right? We have to keep pushing. What do you say? I say we have to keep pushing the ball, like keep pushing towards the net and make sure the goal happens, right? So negotiate. You have to keep and as I've heard from your stories and other young people going, there's massive protests, those climate marches, climate justice assemblies. Those things have to keep going because then only they feel the pressure that is happening. And I also remember in one of the COP, people walked out and said, "We are not talking until you come to the table for what we want from you." And that was very powerful. I think I was in India still, and sitting there and watching that people walked out and those slogans, wow, that was good. So, keep up the pressure, keep pushing them to come to the negotiating table and negotiate a mandate.
Thank you, gentlemen. This is a really nice point to end, because really we have no other option but to keep fighting, keep the hope up, and I think, yes, we will again raise our hopes high, raise our fights high, and keep the balls rolled. And thank you for your time. I really hope the young people who are watching us today, they will have a lot of learning and a lot of insights from all three conversations. Thank you. Thank you for listening to us all this long time. I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot. And yeah, stay tuned with us for the next podcast.